Why doctors are absolutely terrified. What is going on? So many millions of people out there sense that something is not right with the medical profession. Too many doctors seem afraid to step out of line, to ask very obvious questions, which many other people, members of the general public, can see. We are going to have an open, honest discussion as three doctors on why so many members of our profession seem so very scared. What is going on? And for those of you who enjoy our discussions, please make sure that you've signed up for our separate, unique channel, link in description down below. Let's get going then. First reason why doctors are so terrified. Let's talk about debt, the sheer scale of debt that new doctors face. And is that an excuse for doctors not speaking up? Ben, what do you think?
That's a great question. So, the debt that physicians typically come out with can be very impressive. So sometimes if you were to look it up, for example, you'll see it's 200,000 plus. Now that is a huge amount of money, but it's actually more than that. I have many friends that are $300,000 to $400,000 worth of debt. And what happens is you can get loans through the government that typically have a fairly reasonable rate. However, if you go past the amount they allow, you have to take out the private loans. And the interest rate on that can be unbelievably high on these private loans. So you can imagine this compounds very quickly and people end up owing huge amounts of money. Now, there are loan forgiveness programs and things like that. But overall, most physicians end up in pretty significant debt and in this kind of race to try to pay it off, which, as you can imagine, creates a lot of fear of losing your job. And if you step out of line, could you lose your job? And then how do you pay the step back? So it definitely creates significant amount of issues.
That's so true, Ben. And also, we can't forget that unlike any other profession right now, is doctors are continuously getting cutbacks in medical insurance reimbursements. So now you're facing someone going into healthcare with a large amount of debt. But unfortunately, the reimbursement rates and what doctors are paid are continuously being cut back. And so that's kind of scary to think about if you go into more of the details of insurance companies and the changes and everything that we've had, is that, what other profession is the amount of money you're getting reimbursed is coming back when your debt is growing.
That's certainly a good point. Yeah, and I don't think we should underestimate that. I talked about that a fair bit in my videos about new young doctors. Now, we can get into a doctor's duty as well, but from a purely human standpoint, you take a young professional who studied for years and years. Those figures are staggering, by the way. So we talk. I as well have heard stories $500,000 plus in debt.
Oh yeah,
for a new doctor, sometimes even more. I've heard figures up to $1 million, and the UK actually. We're obviously in the United States, but the United Kingdom over the last few years has got incredibly bad as well. Yeah, 100,000 plus pounds in debt. And you take anybody young who's starting out, they're going to have their own dreams, ambitions. They want to start a family, have a mortgage. And yeah, I mean, I can see from a human perspective why a young doctor is going to be absolutely terrified of stepping out of line. I mean, they might see something wrong and think, wow, do I want to rock the boat? Do I want to get fired? Do I want to be in trouble with my licensing authority? Do you think that that's how, let's take a young doctor, male or female, in that position where, let's say during the pandemic, they thought that something was wrong. They're $500,000 in debt. Would that be a big factor, thinking, oh no, I can't rock the boat, I must keep my head down?
I think there are a lot of factors playing into it, but definitely if you're in debt and you're already starting in this place where you're negative, you're going to be very afraid of anything that causes you to lose this job that you spent so long preparing for. So again, I think there are a lot of factors, but yes, I think any profession, if you start somebody that negative and they have to have that kind of job, they have to earn a certain amount to be able to pay it off. Of course, you're going to be afraid to lose it. I would think that's a very natural thing.
Absolutely. And remember, a lot of these doctors coming out training aren't as young as maybe some other people coming out in different professions because, post college, in the United States, at least we do 3 years of internal medicine and then 3 years of specialty after that. So you're talking sometimes 6, 7, sometimes 8 years post-college.
Mm.
So you're also playing those catch-up years, and now you're faced with this surmounting debt, which really can be quite daunting. I think there is a sort of entrapment there because in medical school, we're probably taught more to obey and not necessarily question. And so you're better to go down the route of silence than to question. Because I think that in most cases, doctors who speak up are labeled as outliers.
Yeah, troublemakers.
Yeah, troublemakers. Yeah, I'm who's saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. That's a great segue into what we talk about next. I mean, I think entrapment is good, but I also think servitude is a good term because basically what you have is these young graduates starting out, they're entering a profession. And I believe that this is just right for the alternative interests in medicine and healthcare and the medical industrial complex to really take advantage of the situation. I think we've got a group of people here who are essentially in servitude. They're not going to rock the boat. They'll follow the protocol. And it becomes this assembly line of one thing happening after another. And before you know it, you have an entire profession which is basically captured. It's very sad. Let me ask you this. So this is going on to a slight tangent. We'll come back to critical thinking. Do you think that it's somewhat a fallacy that a young doctor should use that as should we say an excuse? Or is the truth that if the doctor really felt strongly about something, but if worse came to worse, I mean, this would be an extreme circumstance, they lost the ability to practice medicine. Is anybody who is smart enough to get into medical school smart enough to do something else, which is equally or more well paid, if that was a concern? Or is that too much of a risk?
Well, no, I think likely somebody that can work that hard, that's intelligent enough to get through all the training and the testing, yeah, they could probably find some. But don't forget what Peter just said. I mean, you're talking 6 to 8 years post college. So they've lost a lot of earning years. They have to make a certain amount of salary to catch up. And this was a calling in theory. I mean, this was something that people worked really hard to get to. So if you pile on all that and then you threaten them with, hey, you might lose it all, of course they're going to protect. It's going to be actually, this is true of everything. It's going to be the very rare person that's willing to sacrifice something like that for an ideal. And the people who have sacrificed major things for an ideal, we know their names, right? Because it's very rare that happens throughout history. It's a very hard thing to do.
That's true. It's so true. All the years of just dedicating all the nights in the emergency room, covering on the floors, it's really hard to get that up. And I think psychologically, that can be very daunting. And it's very scary to step away from that to try to do something. And I think we all just want to do something better for ourselves, for our family, for patients in general. And I do think that, everything that's been happening in healthcare has really affected the quality of care and maybe the loyalty of people who are called into medicine, who went in for the good well-being of being a doctor and helping people, but now we're faced with this surmounting debt, cutbacks, fighting with insurance companies. And I think that itself, it just makes it so difficult, to stay in medicine, but also to walk away too, because you've given so much of your life, because it's also the college of pre-medical. And I think there's also a sense of people who've had that calling that it's sort of like giving up in your calling, but it's become increasingly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there. Let's come back to the critical thinking aspect of things. So doctors not once you step out of line, not wanting to ask questions, which are very obvious to many people. I'm sure many people watching now. Could it also be a deficit of doctors even having the ability to do that? So we've gone over one possibility, maybe doctors are terrified of debt, but do they also lack the ability potentially to do that? Because throughout medical school, they have simply been memorizing. They have been told what to do by their seniors. They become doctors and even attending doctors and then told what to do with their physician authorities, who are frequently corrupted. We'll come to that in a moment. Do you think that there's a lack of ability? Do you think, shall we just say here, most doctors haven't got it in them, or they haven't got the intellect to actually ask questions, step out of line?
That's also a good question. I think when you think about critical thinking, let me think about it in a couple of ways. Or describe it in a couple of ways. So when it comes to understanding research papers, when it comes to assessing a patient, doctors are definitely trained in critical thinking, and you're trained to use the knowledge you have to make diagnoses. You're trained to look at every research paper, every piece of evidence skeptically. You are trained that way. However, there are certain things in medicine, certain ideas, certain ways of thinking and behaving that are almost above questioning. And so I think there can be a certain kind of groupthink that is above questioning that occurs in medicine. And then you can get so chastised by the people that are training you for kind of going outside of that type of thinking that it can almost be like beaten out of you. So I have seen that kind of happen.
And we go down such a tight pathway in residency and training in our internship years where you earn this sort of autopilot mode and really everything has just been kind of guideline based or told with guideline based. It's very algorithmic. And yes, the experience definitely is there that makes you a better doctor, but also you're really just forced down this tunnel the whole way where you're really not taught anything. You're not probably taught a lot of critical thinking outside of analyzing research data. And, we know that some people are really great at that, but, like we talk about like bench to bedside, people may be very good at analyzing data, but can they apply that in the bedside when they're actually with a patient? And I think that's a really important distinguishment to make, is that not everyone has the ability to probably reach out the side of medicine and say, I'm going to do something else with my knowledge. I can help everyone else out just as much.
Yeah. And supposing let's paint a scenario here. Supposing there's a doctor that thinks that a certain protocol is wrong, or what a physician authority has told them is wrong. It doesn't make sense. Number needed to treat. I mean, we've talked about statins. We've talked about flu shots before as well. I mean, if they really wants to question, does this make sense? Do you think that too many doctors are scared to step out of line because the whole culture from the beginning has been everybody in unison, don't ask questions?
I don't know if it's don't. I would say there's a caveat. It's not don't ask questions, but there are certain things that it is very taboo to question. So there are certain paths in medicine, certain ways of behaving and doing things that if you step out of line, begin to question that process, yes, there can be an enormous amount of flag. And it's interesting. It's not there. There are a lot of the famous physicians and researchers whose name that we all know. That's what they did, and actually, they were seen as quacks for a long time. Many of them, when it was proposed that there may be bacteria, there may be some kind of microbe that's causing this kind of issue, that physician was thought to be a quack. I mean, there are. When you begin to question kind of basic concepts in medicine, you are, like many things in the world, you're often met with a lot of skepticism and kind of negative feedback.
I think the biggest innovations in medicine have been from people who've questioned medicine. And it's amazing to look back at, I had an older patient who, when he got out of college, his guidance counselor was like, oh, you should, join this company, which went on to be a big pharmaceutical company, but he was very instrumental in developing steroids or prednisone. And, so the initial foundations of medicine and a lot of stuff we do today and a lot of disease states were really discovered by really clever physicians who were willing to stand out. But the difference now is that medicine has really been big corporate structures, being corporatized, and it's not the same as it used to be. And so we have mass hospital systems owned by, a single business entity, primary care specialists now owned, and they're in the corporate structure where now we're trained and we're really probably fearful of standing out. And because we're always worried about we're going to lose our job or we're going to be chastised because we're not following a system, because it's very corporate now. It's not, I feel like as a doctor, we're not given the ability we should always be thinking about what else could be going on, but we're not. We're just, now we're being told you have to see patients in so many minutes. You can't order this test. You can't do that. Everything's just so much overly structured for us that takes away the creativity and part of the critical thinking that we have.
Yeah. Well, I have one more point to make about that. I think there's another thing that comes into play, and that's protocols. And so I think one thing that happens was that the industry tried to make things safer by having protocols. So a basic kind of way of doing things that everybody followed so you could standardize treatments. Now, in theory, that's a very good thing to do, but I do think making everyone adhere to protocols above their training and thinking did create, I agree, some groupthink, and it decreased some of the critical thinking necessary to treat patients. So I agree with trying to standardize so everyone gets the same kind of treatment, but what were the downsides to them? And I think that did happen over time.
Yes.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to interrupt that tremendous discussion for a moment to tell you about our expanding health and well-being store. I'm very proud of our natural, uniquely formulated products. Check in the links down below. We've got our natural anti-inflammation immune support, bone support, memory support, heart support, and sleep support. Also, our newly released organic chai mix based on the tea that I regularly drink. We are made in the USA and very proud to be working with a veteran-owned company. ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America, ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. All right, back to the discussion.
And I really like the point about basically every single innovation in medicine or indeed science has usually been somebody who stepped out of line. I mean, think how controversial it was saying that the Earth is round, or initially Semmelweis, which is a very famous story from Austria, I believe in the 1800s, Dr. Semmelweis, who was convinced that mothers were basically dying during childbirth because of a bacterial infection, and he was ridiculed, and he ended up in an asylum because he got so frustrated. But he turned out to be right. H. pylori is another one, the bacteria that causes stomach ulcers. I mean, these things keep on happening. I think it gets to a larger point of humans being human, sadly, groupthink. And this is, I mean, at its fundamental level, chimpanzees behave the same way. If somebody steps out, you have to all follow the same narrative and the same thing that everybody's doing. And it's just sad. And I think it's ingrained in us. But what I don't excuse it for, what I have less tolerance for, is doctors who are supposed to be above it in a way. They are supposed to be the most noble profession, the profession that speaks up without fear, wants to always tell the truth. And I fear that it's being completely captured. And that's why this is kind of ingrained even more, the doctors who are terrified of stepping out of line. This is also good going into what I want to talk about next, which is the role of professional societies and licensing authorities. Now, in my opinion, no surprises, I'm sure I'm a bit more extreme than you two gentlemen in this regard, but I think physician societies are the worst players in American medicine and healthcare. I'm not a member of any of them. And basically, you can see how they're all funded, all the medical, surgical societies. Look at what their conferences are like. And it is from those societies that doctors get their directives. They work with licensing authorities, and they are completely captured. If it was up to me, I would say that no doctor society should be allowed to accept anything more than $50 a year, $50 a year, from a pharmaceutical company or any other big business interest. I think you would see things quickly change if that happened. But I'm really disgusted by doctor societies in the United States. Indeed, across most of the world it's like this, but I live here. So I think they're a huge player in this issue.
I totally agree, Suneel. So if you go to some of these conferences that are done by societies, outside of the lectures for continuing education, you have these big, huge auditoriums that are sort of like a Disney World of pharmaceutical companies that are set up in very large booths. And probably a lot of you people have not been able to access these, but they're like whole, like living room set up in there and just giving away free things. And it's really to draw doctors in, and it's all just run by big pharma. And that's really who's running the show. It's not doctors at all. When you walk into that room, you're just herded around, and it's just these huge booths full of all these pharmaceutical people telling you how you should be practicing medicine. Why are you not prescribing this? And it's almost a little bit like shaming, like if you're not prescribing my medication, you're not really following a certain level of care that you should.
Yeah. And, a lot of these, it's just really, if you see some of these societies, they come up with guidelines, just like you said, hey, at this level of LDL with this disease, if your cholesterol is this, you should be put on this dose of statin. how can you trust an organization that's making that kind of claim when they've taken money from the very organization that produces the drug? I mean, that's such a profound conflict of interest. It's incredible. And you can see it. It's throughout. I mean, it's all the size. I don't believe they started this way. I think the society started, American Medical Association, cardiology, all these different societies started, I think, for the right reasons, to try to kind of give some guidance to their profession. But they have very clearly been corrupted over the years, which many things do get corrupted over the years once money makes its way in. And yeah, you just see they're one of the many things in medicine that is kind of decayed and corrupted, and very unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. Yeah, doctors. So Jim, give you an idea how it works, assuming they're not in the medical profession. So doctors of any specialty will have their professional society, which is giving them guidelines. Professional societies frequently work with the licensing authorities as well when we're talking about boards of medicine or surgery. The licensing boards in individual states are a little bit different, but essentially, most doctors out there will be getting directives from these societies, which are completely corrupted. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of doctors are thinking, well, if I do something different, as you've alluded to, maybe I'll face sanctions. Maybe they will pull my board certification or pull my license at the extreme. And it's so terrible because ultimately, this is about you. We can talk as doctors on the inside. We're making these shows to really highlight some of the problems, talk about them in more detail, and give you a perspective that you may not have heard before. But physician societies, I could talk for an hour. In fact, let me tell you a story, something that happened during the pandemic that made me realize what utter scoundrels these people are, for want of a better word. Do you use the word scoundrel much in the United States?
Sometimes.
You use a more colorful language than that.
It's a scoundrel.
Okay, let me tell you what happened. So during the pandemic, and it was at the height of when the shots were being pushed, and quite clearly, the Board of Medicine, for which I was a member, got some sort of word that doctors were questioning it, asking, of course, very legitimate questions. I mean, new technology, why are you rolling it out so quickly? People have natural immunity. Why are you giving it to kids and babies? Very obvious question. So what did they do? Instead of acting like true people of medicine, true doctors, they sent out these really threatening emails. Mm-hmm. I will never forget, because the colleagues around me, absolutely terrified because I was getting texted about it. So I just laughed at them basically because it just opened my eyes. And I was making content at the time. I really didn't care whether they came after me or what, because I'm so confident that I was being a man of true medicine and science. But regardless, they sent out this email saying, if you spread any misinformation or basically question the shots, you will face sanctions, possibly have your board certification pulled. And I thought to myself, I've been a member of your board for a few years. I have never once in years seen you be all in on anything. I've never seen you say, let's be all in on reducing healthcare costs. Let's be all in on improving healthcare quality. Let's be all in on making the medical profession work for you. Never saw any of that. But when do they get riled up? When they think that doctors are spreading misinformation, which turns out to be correct. And that made me realize, that was the final thing I would say, which made me realize these people are scoundrels. They are not about health and well-being. I don't trust them. I'm not a member of any physician societies. I have no intention of going to any doctor conferences. That's my story from the pandemic. But aside from just the doctor societies, I left you speechless there. That's the
I also know how we
yeah, you got no, I was wrong, but I'm sure you saw the emails as well.
Yeah, no, I think that, and you're so correct, Suneel, on that point, and you've always been correct on that topic. Is that we were just so brought down that we can't think outside the box as doctors, and it's affecting, I think, quality of care. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this video, and that's why we do all our videos, is that the quality of care of medicine is going down. And I think just be able to not speak up or have these medical societies telling us what to do, but then the minute we question it, we can be ostracized or really have some type of action taken against us, which is suspension of licensing, it's horrible.
Yeah, and most doctors who got that were utterly terrified right there. I mean, I realized right away that they were not going on science. They were captured. And I, to be honest, knew inside that their bark was going to be way worse than their bite. I didn't think they would do anything. And actually, if they had come after me at the time, I would have gladly in public taken them on because I was so confident that they were wrong and they were being dogmatic. I've got zero respect. If anyone from my particular board is listening or any member of any medical society, I have zero respect for you. You are part of the reason why medicine is going downhill. And we need to reclaim our profession. But before I get on my stand talking about that, I do want to touch upon another aspect of why doctors might be terrified of stepping out of line. And that is the influence of government and politics. What do you think of that?
You know, everything you just said, I think this was all highlighted during the pandemic. For all of these reasons, I think physicians are nervous to speak out, but it was never more clear than during the pandemic. So the government had a response. And in the beginning, it's predictable. Everybody was afraid. They didn't understand this thing. They wanted to get everyone in line to try to save lives. But what became very clear is that censorship, intimidation, these types of things, and groupthink were going to be pushed on everyone. And so it was very rare that physicians sit out. And what you do see is whatever the government's current agenda is pushed through the societies. And you keep hearing those talking points over and over again. And it's weird to think that a government agenda would be pushed on to the actual practice of doctor-patient care. That should be, in many ways, its own entity, but it's not, right? So whatever the flavor of the month is for the current administration, that gets pushed on to the direct care of the patient and the physician, which is kind of crazy that it's that involved. And it wasn't always.
No, I think it was the first time in my career where actual government and politics took control of healthcare overall. Yeah. And we were told really what we couldn't say, what we could do. And, we had patients coming to ask to question us. And I almost felt like if you weren't telling a patient exactly what the politics or the government or was pushing at the time, I almost had to say it in like a quiet way to patients as if it was something to be shameful about thinking outside the box.
Yeah, whether it was masks or anything else. It reminds me of a story during the pandemic. There was somebody who I knew who had tinnitus, ringing in the ear after a shot, after the pandemic shot, and went to the ENT and told me the story afterwards that the ENT doctor, after she had examined her, just basically whispered to her, "It's a shot, I've seen it." And had to actually whisper, didn't want to say it loud, but just wanted to reassure the patient. And thankfully, she got better quite quickly. But the ENT doctor right there, why would a doctor feel the need to whisper in the clinic room? But this gets to what you're talking about, this total capture. And how is that good medicine? How is that the principles of Hippocrates? What happened to us? Well, not us. We all seem to say, but what happened to the medical profession? How did we get here?
We didn't stick together. And I think that's the problem, is that you have a few people that are willing to speak out, like yourself, Suneel, but then, again, what we talked about, you're labeled as a troublemaker.
Exactly.
And, it's,
by the way, I'm out of that.
It's the least path of resistance for doctors these days is just go with the flow and not stand out and just stick together, even if it means seeing what you spent so many years of your life, dedicated years, hours and hours training for, crumbling. So we can't provide the quality of care that we were trained to do or wanted to do in today's medical world. I know I can. I know that I'm questioned with whatever I do by insurance companies. My hands are tied. Like, there's what doctors want to treat patients and how we're told.
Yeah, really good point. Okay, well, let's summarize then. We will each talk about the number one reason why we think doctors are terrified. We've all talked through the various topics here. What could be the reason? What do we think, gentlemen, in your minds, is the number one reason?
Well, I think it's broader than just doctors. I think it is very hard for social animals like we are to go outside of what the rest of your group thinks and to stand out and oppose them by yourself. That has always been hard to do. That is very rare that someone does that successfully, because the repercussions of that are you become ostracized, you become silenced, you become embarrassed publicly. And now with social media, the embarrassment and ostracizing is so fast. So I think it is very pronounced in medicine because they do it at such a high level, and they can take your job away and your earning potential away. And it's made clear to you that that can happen. So in my mind, that's the reason that everyone's so terrified, especially physicians.
I think that's a really excellent point. So your number one reason would be groupthink. It gets to something I heard once, which was absolutely outstanding thing to say. And I'm not comparing what happened now to that horrible event, but somebody once said, I heard it stated on a show, that everybody assumes that if they were in the Netherlands during World War II, they would have been the one hiding Anne Frank. But the truth is, most people, 95% plus of people, would not. They would have probably been the ones coordinating with authorities or maybe getting her in trouble. But it takes a lot to step out of line to say, I'm going to risk everything to do the right thing. I still think that doctors should be a step above this by virtue of how they are trained. Clearly, that's not the case. But thank you. That was a fantastic answer. What do you think, Peter?
I think the problem right now with medicine is that there's such few entities controlling such a large portion of healthcare. You have hospital mergings, you have the corporatization of healthcare. And going back through medical school and all the training, we're always taught to obey and not to question. And we're taught that what we're told is how we should do. And I think now, even more so, what you had said is that I think a lot of doctors are probably afraid to step out of the box just because of the amount of control with administrators over healthcare right now, that it's not, if you're a doctor or not, you could easily be eliminated from your career and lose your license over stepping outside the box to question something that may be very real.
Okay. I really like that answer as well. Yeah. So my number one reason, I'm going to stand firm on pure cowardice from doctors. I'm going to be quite brutal here. I don't think that a doctor should have any excuse. If they see something, they should absolutely speak up. And I believe in fate. I believe in destiny. I think there's good karma in the world. I think if you're doing the right thing, good things are going to happen to you. And I'm also of the belief that people who want to make excuses will always make excuses. So yes, a doctor, I just come out of school, I have that debt. That's my excuse for not speaking up. A doctor midway through his career or her career, I have a mortgage and family, I'm not going to speak up. A doctor who's about to retire, I'm about to retire, I'm not going to speak up now. What's the point? People who want to find excuses for being basically cowards will be cowards. But I was so quote unquote red pilled during the pandemic to what I saw around me, both online and in real life, doctors failing to speak up for very obvious things. And all it takes, human nature, is for 5 people to speak out, and it can turn into an avalanche really fast. But it's getting those initial people. I mean, obviously you're not in this category because I knew you during the pandemic and you were thinking like me, but I will stand firm on pure doctor cowardice. It is a duty of a doctor to abide by the principles of Hippocrates, no matter what the consequences. I won't bend on that. So those are my thoughts. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. Lots more we could probably talk about as well. But for now, we will say goodbye. Stay well, everybody. Keep going. Remember, your health and well-being and your family's health and well-being is the most important thing. Do not accept second best. Keep striving to do the best yourself, and also look for good doctors in your area. There are good doctors out there. Sometimes it can take a bit of work to find, but there are doctors out there who do think in a more traditional way. Take care, everyone. Do check in the links down below as well for our natural health and well-being store, ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America, ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. We will speak again in the next show.